We are LifeChurch Livonia.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Life Church. How you guys doing this morning? Second service, feeling alive? Good. I'm happy for you. Congratulations. You're awake this morning. My name is Alex, and I'm on staff here at LifeChurch Livonia. Thank you guys for... Hey, good to see you too. I'm on staff here at LifeChurch Livonia, and if we haven't met, if this is your first time, just want to say welcome. Really glad you're here. I'd love to meet you in the lobby afterward. You're joining us right now in this series called Holy Roar. Holy Roar is a series on worship, and how the 7 Hebrew words that the Bible uses in the book of Psalms for praise have the power to transform our relationships with God, with each other, and with our lives. And so this morning, we're going to be taking a look at one of those words, but I want to start with a story about one of my early interactions with the word we're going to be looking at today. You see, my experience with this word begins in Chicago, Illinois. My wife and I were recently engaged. We had gotten an internship at this church called Willow Creek in Chicago. We'd gotten it kind of at the end of spring. It was starting early summer, and it was an unpaid internship. So we have to save up as much money as we can in like a month and a half before we go down to this internship and try to live there for the next 2.5 months working at this church. So, we're in college, we're poor, but we're excited. This is a new opportunity. We've never done something like this before. So we both get hired at this internship. We're thrilled. We're like, this is going to be such a great experience together. And we save as much money as we can before we go down. Like I said, we didn't have long to save. So I saved like $500, which was great for it being in college, but it was for like 2.5 months, right? And so, but I was sure I could do it. I had a budget, I had a plan. I was like, this makes sense. The numbers have checked out. We're going to go for this. But there were a number of things I didn't count on. I just didn't count on them. Thing number one I didn't count on. The day we're supposed to leave for the internship, Amber's car just dies. Like, we went to go get it serviced, and the guy servicing it says, I cannot believe the whole bottom of this car is not just fallen off. You cannot drive this anywhere, let alone to Chicago. And so we're like, oh no, what do we do? And so we have to delay our trip by a whole week, and we're frantically looking for a car. We're, looking at all these ads, and Craigslist becomes our new best way to spend time. And, we're looking frantically, can't find a car. So my future father-in-law, Amber's dad, says, hey, I got an idea. We're meeting at this wedding in Indiana 2 weeks from now. Amber's cousin's getting married. Why don't you guys take my truck? I'll keep looking for our car here. We'll find one. You can send us the money. We'll buy it, and then we'll meet at the wedding and swap. Good plan. We're back on schedule. We're going to Chicago again. And so we head down to Chicago. We do our first Sunday serving there. Everything's going really great. I drop Amber back off at her host home, and I start driving back to mine, and I realize, holy cow, I'm like on the E right now. I need to stop for gas. Routine thing, done it a million times. Pull up to the gas station, pop out, put my card in, doing the whole thing. And then when I go to select which gas I want, I see blinking at me $5.04. And I was like, no. So I look on my phone, and all throughout Chicagoland, gas is over $5 a gallon. And it's been this way for months, and I didn't know because I'm not from Chicago. And I was like, I did not budget for this. And so what are you going to do, though? I fill up because we have to work this job. And so life continues on. The next day, I go pick Amber up for our weekly date. We've gone on a weekly date like every week of our relationship. It's one of our favorite times of the week. We really love it. And we're really excited about this one because it's Monday, and there's no church work to do, and we're going to explore the area we're living in for the summer. So I pick Amber up, and we go explore this huge strip on Randall Road, which has got just like all of these different businesses and fun things, restaurants we've never eaten at before, only heard about. And so we're going to a lot of places. We're going out for lunch, then we're getting smoothies, then we're going out for dinner, then we're paying for an arcade, And Amber is just dropping some coin on this date. And I am thinking to myself, wow, girl, you have saved so much money. This is amazing. I can't believe how much money you were able to save. You're such a hard worker. This is great. We're going to have a great summer if the dates keep coming like this. And so the 2 weeks go by, and we can't find the car. My father-in-law couldn't find a car, so we have to drive to the wedding and give him the truck back. Luckily, my roommate was also working at Willow Creek at the time, so he allowed us to take his car out of state to Indiana, and which I was pretty sure I asked him about, and then drive it back. and then we commuted with him and paid for gas. So we would pay for gas, and he would go out of his way. And it was, a long way to commute with Amber and everything. Her host home was probably 25 minutes from ours, but then it was like another 20, 25 minutes to the church from there. So, like an hour commute one way with traffic. It was a lot. We didn't plan on it, but what are you going to do? It's just part of what happens, right? Life happens. So we're still looking for a car, still in need. It's not an ideal situation, but we're making it work. Monday rolls around. This is about 3 weeks into the internship. And I think to myself, between the $5 a gallon for gas, the trip to Indiana and back, food for the week, and then the dates that we've been going on, I think I've spent more than I budgeted. I should check my account before we go on this date just to make sure I can pay for it. Open my account, $50. And my heart sinks. And I go, oh my gosh, how did this happen? But then I remember, oh yeah, Amber's saved a lot of money. We're engaged. We're not living together. We haven't had the money conversation yet. So I was like, this is going to be a good first thing for us. We'll talk about sharing and pooling our money together, and we'll figure out the next 8 weeks of this internship together. And so I pick her up for the day, and I'm like sheepishly really embarrassed, like, Amber, I'm so sorry. I can't pay for the date. We need gas to get to work tomorrow, and I'm paying for it, and that's all of my money. I don't know what I'm going to do after that. How much money do you have left? And she was like, I don't think I have that much money left either. I don't know, though. And I was like, you don't know? Like, well, how much did you budget for the summer? And she was like, budget? I've never done a budget before. And my heart just drops. And I think to myself, we are so screwed. And so we look at her account, $20. And so now we have this joint $70 to last the next 8 weeks of this internship in Chicago, hundreds of miles from home. This, my friends, is what we call not enough. Not enough of that money. Now, I'm going to finish the story a little later, so just bear with me. I know some of you want to know how it ends right now. Be patient, okay? We're going to get there together. But we've all experienced not enough, right? I mean, for Amber and I, this is a funny story now. It was not funny then. And maybe like Amber and I, you're experiencing not enough financially. The bills are coming, the deadlines are almost here, and you just don't have it. And you don't know what to do. For some of us, the not enough is in time. Not enough time for rest. Not enough time for the kids. Not enough time for work. Not enough time to live the life that you want to live. For some of us, the not enough is love. Maybe you and your significant other just aren't connecting like you used to. And things aren't going well. And part of you just wants to be somewhere else with someone else. But you know you need to figure it out. You feel trapped. Not enough love. For some of you, that not enough love is painful because you see everyone else in these relationships and you're not in one. Why not you? What's wrong with you? Why does everyone else get somebody but me? And the not enough is there, and it hurts. I don't know what your not enough is. Maybe it's not enough peace, not enough patience. Maybe it's not enough health, not enough friendship, not enough understanding, not enough of God. The list goes on and on. But whatever your not enough is, those manifest themselves as these unspoken, hard-to-name compulsions that drive our decisions day after day after day. And they create these frantic spirits in us. Well, we can feel the not enough even if we can't name it yet, even if we don't know what the source is. And so we become desperate, trying to fill the not enough with enough. And over time, not enough creates a cloud, like a photo filter, over the way you see life. And it saps your joy. It saps your peace. It changes your perspective. You become cynical and jaded. And the question I want to answer this morning is, how do you walk through seasons of both enough and not enough with peace, joy, stability, and centeredness? How do you walk through these seasons well? Well, I believe that God has a way forward for us in His Word this morning. And I believe that way forward has to do with worship. Like I said, this is a series on worship. And the Hebrew word that we're going to take a look at today is a word called Towdah. Now, Towdah means a lot of things, right? The Old Testament was written in Hebrew. This is in the Old Testament. And so we translate it to mean a number of different things. Some of the things we translate Towdah to mean are an extension of the hand, thanksgiving, a confession, a sacrifice of praise, thanksgiving for things not yet received, a choir of worshipers even. But amidst all these different definitions in English, there's a solid through line through all of the meanings and translations of Towdah. And there are really only two important things that I think we need to grasp about that through line if we're going to walk through these seasons of not enough well. Thing number one we need to understand. Every time Towdah is used in the Old Testament, it's used in relationship to the Israelite temple offerings, specifically the thank offerings. You see, there were offerings made in Israelite worship where they met with God in this temple, and they would give some offerings to be made right with God. They had sinned, they had broken a relationship with God, and there were some offerings that made them right with God. Towdah is not one of those offerings. Towdah is an offering that they could make after they had been made right with God. It's called a fellowship offering. And you gave this fellowship offering out of friendship or alliance with somebody. And so when you give this fellowship offering of thanks to God, you're expressing a friendship with God. What I think is so interesting and even kind of weird about the word Towdah is Towdah means a thanks sacrifice, a sacrifice of thanks, which is interesting to me because thanks, gratitude, is what you give as your not enough starts to close. Oh, there was not enough time, and then my wife did the dishes. Thank you. Oh, there was not enough money, and then you blessed us with this, paying for dinner. Thank you. Oh, there was not enough rest, and you watched the kids for an hour. Thank you. Right? Then not enough begins to close, and that's why you give gratitude. But a sacrifice, on the other hand, seems to make the not enough increase, doesn't it? A sacrifice, by definition, is something I give to you that is really just beneficial for you and painful for me to give. It costs me something. I had something and now I don't. And I give it as a sacrifice because I'm not getting that back. Right? So what's so interesting to me about this word, and the first thing I think we need to understand, is that Towdah is a gratitude that costs you something. Towdah is a gratitude that costs you something. So what does it cost you exactly? We'll get there. Chill out, Tiger. Okay, we're on this journey together. So thing number two we need to understand about Towdah is the way it was actually used in worship. Because it's one thing to just like have a vocab lesson, but that's not helpful for how we live our lives. You know what I'm saying? So how is this actually lived out in the Old Testament? Well, there's a guy named David in the Old Testament. So this is pre-Jesus, okay? Bible's Old Testament, New Testament. Old Testament is pre-Jesus. New Testament, life of Jesus on, okay? This is in the Old Testament. A guy named David, he walked through a lot of seasons of both enough and not enough. And God praises the way he lives his life in the Old Testament. God says, David followed my commands in everything he did except one thing. He had one blunder, but everything else I approve of this man's life. He lived the way I wanted him to live. And so I think we have a lot to learn about how to walk through these seasons of not enough through the life of David. David's early life, up to where we're going to meet him in the story, really seems kind of like this Hollywood movie. He was this nobody kid from a nobody family in a nobody town. And overnight, he becomes this somebody. See, David was an Israelite. And they were at war with this country called the Philistines. And it seemed like David's side was losing that war. The Philistine champion Goliath had been threatening to single-handedly enslave the entire nation of Israel unless someone could stop him. And David, this nobody kid from this nobody town, goes to visit his nobody brothers in this big war. And David says, you know what, I'll fight Goliath, I'll step up, I'll do it. Even though he was only 14 to 16 years old at the time. He steps up and in the biggest upset in their history, kills Goliath. Immediately catapults him into international fame. He becomes a symbol of hope for the Israelites, gets drafted into the king's army and put in a high position of power as a commander in the military. Life is going David's way. Things are looking up. He's got a real underdog story, a something to nothing. Or flip that, nothing to something. You know what I'm saying? Right after this, David meets a best friend, which I think for David was so important because, like I said, David grew up in a nobody family and felt like a nobody in that family. He was the youngest of all of his brothers. And it was clear how they felt about him, and it wasn't good. He was often invisible. When a person of importance comes to visit his home, David is sent away so that that person doesn't see him. And after David has all this success in the military, he gets a best friend, a guy named Jonathan, the son of the king of Israel, King Saul. And Jonathan is there for David in a way that David wished his brothers always were. David knows that Jonathan's got his back. He knows that whether they're at war, whether they're following God, whether it's just day-to-day life, that Jonathan's going to be there for him. And it fills something in him, this relational gap that he had as a kid. And then right after that, the story sweetens even more. See, a girl falls in love with David. And this girl happens to be Jonathan's sister, Michal. She falls in love with him, they get married, and David almost overnight has this rags to riches royalty story, a real fairy tale kind of thing. He's now literally related to his best friend, has a wife who's head over heels with him, high up in the military commander position, and now actually in the family of the king. It seems like his life is a fairy tale, like this season of enough is never ending. But David's life wasn't a fairy tale. It was just like yours. It was just like mine. It was a real life. There were seasons of enough, but there were also seasons of not enough. You see, right after this happens, shortly after his marriage, King Saul, David's father-in-law, tries to kill him. Now, this had been a problem in the past, which I know is weird to say, but different times. This had been a problem in the past because Saul had this kind of demonic-induced mental illness. The Bible said a demon would come upon him and he would just go out of his mind and just try to kill people in the room. And David was often there to help soothe him and calm him down. So this had been a problem in the past, but this time it wasn't random. It was pointed. It wasn't happenstance or haphazard. David didn't just happen to be in the room. This was a chase. This was an attempt at murder. And it was continuous. So David has to flee his home, has to leave his new wife, has to leave his best friend, has to leave his family of origin and his new family, and he flees to a different part of the country. That's not enough for Saul. He's the king. So he spares no expense in tracking David down and trying to kill him again. So David now, the end of his rope, feels like there's nowhere for him to go but leave the country. And so he does. And this is where we pick up here, and this is very weird to me. See, David goes to Gath, and Gath was one of the 5 capitals of the land of the Philistines, David's mortal enemies. And what's more, he shows up at Gath carrying the sword of Goliath, the reason the Philistines hate him, on his back, and just shows up. Like, what is he expecting? And what kind of situation do you have to be in to be like, you know what? I think the safest place for me right now is in the home of my mortal enemies. That would be a good move for me right now. Like, what kind of life circumstance drives somebody to that conclusion? But that's where he is. And so he shows up, knocks on the door, and the servant's like, hey, isn't that sword aren't you the... And this is where we pick up. But the servants of Achish said to him, wait, isn't this David, the king of the land? Isn't he the one they sing about in their dances? Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands. Those tens of thousands are our soldiers. So David took these words to heart and was very much afraid of Achish, king of Gath. So he pretended to be insane in their presence. And while he was in their hands, he acted like a madman, making marks on doors of the gate and letting saliva run down his beard. I just love this picture. His defense plan for, oh crap, this was a bad idea, is just to start writing on things and just drooling down his face. I don't understand that, but whatever, it worked out for him. So Achish said to his servants, look at the man. He is insane. Why bring him to me? Am I so short on madmen that you have to bring this fellow here to carry on like this in front of me? Must this man come into my house? And so David left Gath and escaped to the cave of Adullam. This, my friends, is not enough. David's life has been going so well up to this point. He just has found success in everything he's done. And now, the pinnacle of his society, the royal family, is out for his blood. Every good blessing that has happened to him over the past couple years feels like a curse right now. It feels so bittersweet that he has friends back home. Wouldn't it have just been better if he had never met a friend, let alone a wife, to miss right now? Wouldn't that have been easier to bear? He's in deep pain, and this is a life-altering crisis that he's in. So how does he respond in this? How does he walk through this season of not enough, where he feels like the world hates him and there's nowhere he can go that's safe? Well, luckily, we have an account in the book of Psalms, which is the Bible's book of worship. It's a song, a prayer that David wrote to God while he was in this time of crisis. David writes, "Be merciful to me, my God, for my enemies are in hot pursuit. All day long they press their attack. My adversaries pursue me all day long. In their pride, many are attacking me. When I'm afraid, I put my trust in you. In God, whose word I praise. In God I trust and am not afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? All day long they twist my words. All their schemes are for my ruin. They conspire, they lurk, they watch my steps, hoping to take my life. Because of their wickedness, do not let them escape. In your anger, God, bring the nations down. Record my misery. List my tears on your scroll. Are they not in your record? Then my enemies will turn back when I call for help. By this I will know that God is for me. In God, whose word I praise. In the Lord, whose word I praise. In God I trust and am not afraid. What can man do to me? I'm under vows to you, my God. I will present my thank offerings to you, for you have delivered me from death and my feet from stumbling, that I may walk before God in the light of life." Now, there are two really important things I think it's really crucial for us to see in David's response in this season of not enough. First thing is that he's really honest with his struggles. He says he's in misery, that even though he trusts in God, he's afraid. And I think he may even be expressing some denial here. He says, because of, where does he say that? When I'm afraid, I put my trust in you. In God, whose word I praise. In God, I trust, and I am not afraid. But we know from the text we just read, he is afraid. He's afraid of Achish. Maybe some denial going on. I don't know. Not only that, but he asks God to take note of his tears. Asks God to see his anguish. Asks God to count the tears he's cried. And then he asks God for some sick kind of justice by destroying an entire nation. I don't know what kind of mental state you have to be in to be like, you know what would make me feel a lot better, God? Genocide. The whole nation, just gone. That would be great. If you did that for me, I would feel much better. Like, that's messed up. That's really messed up. And we know God is a loving God, right? We know Jesus in the New Testament says to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. And David just was like, nope, kill them all. and I really like that a lot because David doesn't hide what's actually in him. You see, a lot of us feel things like that sometimes. But then we're embarrassed and go, whoa, no. No one's going to know about that feeling. No one's going to see that thought. And David doesn't hide it from the Lord. He gives the full force of his emotional state to God and lets God sort it out. And he's not embarrassed to do that. I think that's so important because you see, worship is offering your whole self, your true self to God, not a partial self or a false self. You see, when we only offer God what we wish was in us or what other people, like at church, wish was in us, when we only offer God the pieces of our life, either that are hurt or that are good, we're offering God a false self, a fake self. It's not really who we are, and you can't worship a God of truth from a place of dishonesty in your own soul. And David does such a good job modeling this for us here. God really wants you to offer him all your hopes and your dreams and your smiles, but he also wants your fear. He also wants your anger. He also wants your tears. That's the kind of worship that he desires. The second thing that David does is that he ends with Towdah. So I think the first step that's really crucial, you got to offer your whole self to God, the real self to God, not just the pieces you wish were in you or others wish were in you. And second thing David does is he ends with Towdah. He says here, I'm under vows to you, my God. I will present my thank offerings, my Towdah, to you. For you have delivered me from death and my feet from stumbling, that I may walk before God in the light of life. And I think that's so cool because it's not true. God hadn't delivered him yet. David was still running for his life when he wrote this. He wasn't safe. It wasn't resolved. The story didn't end yet. There wasn't like, yeah, I'm glad that's in the past, man. Woo, that was tough, but God got me through. No, he's still in it. He's in it right now. But he's expressing this Towdah of thanks because what he's saying is, God, I thank you that you have come through for me before. When I was a kid and I felt invisible, you were there for me and you came through for me. When I was a shepherd and things were dangerous, you came through for me. When I fought Goliath, you came through for me. And because of that, I believe that you will come through for me again. God, I believe that you are enough for every not enough that I'm experiencing in my life. And because you are enough, I am not afraid of not enough anymore. And so I cry Towdah, thanking you for who you have been and who you will be in faith, that your enough is always big enough to cover my not enough. Towdah is this cry of gratitude that says that you, God, are the source of all things. It just recognizes that I am even here right now in this crisis because I exist, because I'm alive. And that you are the source of that life, God. You are the source of all of me. And because of that, I can trust you to be my source in the future, just like you have been in the past. So I'm not afraid of not enough anymore. This is a sacrifice of thanks. But what's the sacrifice? What's David sacrificing here? He sacrifices his perspective, his bitterness, his resentment. What David doesn't say is, God, I've been praying and I feel like I've hit my quota. Why haven't you come through for me yet? God, it's been months of this now. I keep writing Psalms and I'm not seeing an answer. He doesn't say, God, this isn't what you promised me. I have a wife, I have friends, I have a family, and I'm gone from all of them. What is your problem? He doesn't say any of that. That's what he sacrifices, is his perspective. He sacrifices the perspective that what I feel in me right now and what I see in front of me right now are not the whole story. That life is bigger than this. And that you somehow, some way, God, see all of it. And I trust you to take care of me in that. Even if it's not what I want, even if it's not in my timing, and even if it's not right now. I trust you to take care of that. And I thank you in advance that you will. I thank you in advance that you will. And what I love about that imagery of an offering is in the temple worship. When someone was made right with God and then came to give this thanks offering, most of these people were very poor. And they would sacrifice their food, what they had to live. It was literally the way they survived. They would sacrifice the greatest pieces of their survival, their resources, their sustenance to God. And in doing that, they would say, God, you gave this to me in the first place. All I have is yours. And so I'm not afraid to give it back because I know that I got it from you in the first place and you can give it to me again. This is Towdah. It's a sacrifice on my perspective. It's a sacrifice on me being the God that controls my world. And it's thanking God that he is God, that he is the source, and that he will take care of me. So how do we do that? How do we do that? How do we walk that out, especially in seasons when it's not enough? When we feel even the prayers, even the praises, even church, even the scriptures aren't enough. How do we walk that out? I think David models that for us really well. Really, really well. And I think the first thing we have to do, just like David, is tell God how we're really feeling. How we're really feeling. And so what I want you to do right now is if you have a bulletin, if you picked a bulletin up, I want you to take out the notes page. And I want you to write on it how you're really feeling right now. What are the not enoughs in your life? Are you mad about it? Do you have faith in it? Are you content? Are you angry? Are you grieving? What are the not enoughs? What's really going on? And unless you can offer that to God, we can't move farther down this process, and we can't walk through these seasons well. So step one is being honest with God about what's really in you. And I just encourage you, be immature if you have to. Be crazy. David asked for genocide. Not mature, not appropriate, but it was honest. And it was honest with the Lord. I think that's such a beautiful place. And when God looks at David in the scriptures, he says, this man gets me. Because there's no boundaries, there's no veil, there's no wall between his heart and mine. He feels free to tell me those things. And I feel free to do the right thing and not listen to him sometimes. Second, after you've told God what's really in you, you got to sacrifice your perspective by being grateful. Gratitude does this curious thing. When you acknowledge God for the gifts that he's given you in the past and the gifts that you have right now, it's not hard to see how he can provide for you in the future. And the more you say thank you, anger starts to dissipate. Resentment starts to fade. The tunnel vision of grief, the tunnel vision of panic, the tunnel vision of not enough begins to go away. Because you begin to see the pattern, don't you? You begin to see the pattern that you've been there the whole time. And you will not let me down. So on your notes page, on your bulletin, I want you to write out how you're really feeling about the not enough. So do it in your journal at home. This is how I start most of my mornings. What's really going on? And then below that, thank God. Thank him for the gifts in your life, however small they may be. And then the third step is to repeat. There's a reason the Psalms are 150 chapters. It's because in order to walk through a season well, it doesn't take an event. It's not a worksheet. It takes a relationship. It takes a walk. It takes time. It takes day after day of this kind of honesty, this kind of heart-to-heart interface between you and the creator of the universe. And then it takes gratitude for you to be able to sacrifice your perspective and reorient it to God's perspective of your life. And that kind of honest, sacrificial gratitude is what it means to worship with Towdah, to praise God in Towdah. So let me finish my story from the beginning. Amber and I were sitting in my buddy's car. We're sitting in front of the midweek service at Willow Creek. $70, 8 weeks. Life was rough. And we talked about, through a lot of tears and a lot of anger and shame, are we going to go home? Are we going to quit? Or are we going to try to finish the 8 weeks? We don't have a car, so how can we get home even? Figure it out. Uber. And what we came to as a conclusion is that we believe that God had placed us in this internship, that he had made a way for us to be here, and if he had made a way for us to be here, we should stay. And we came to the conclusion that right now we have a safety net. You see, we can quit, and we can go home to our parents. But we knew that if we were going to get married, we were going to have financially hard times again. And there would be no safety net. There would be no going home. And if we couldn't have faith now when it was easier, how could we have faith when it wasn't? And so the ultimatum that we were choosing between was we stay with $70 and just believe God that he's going to provide, or we go home and we end our engagement. Because we shouldn't do this if we can't do this now. So we stayed. And we walked into midweek, and we worshiped and prayed our guts out, begging God to provide for us. And a few days later, one of the girls volunteering in the youth group came up to us and said, "You guys are looking for a car, right?" We were like, yes, we are. She said, cool. So my family, rich family, by the way, my family has this Honda Odyssey that we were thinking about donating to the Cars Ministry at Willow, and the Cars Ministry would take kind of older cars, fix them up, and then give them to families in need. She was like, but then I remembered you guys, and I was like, oh yeah, you guys are in need. We could just give it to you. And so they did. And this car right here that you have seen me drive for many years was given to us when we were at Willow Creek that summer as an act of God providing for us. Had 115,000 miles on it, and we just had to pay $300 to change over the license and registration. And so we stayed. And that $70 ran out. And then God provided enough money the next week for food. And just when we had no more gas, he provided money for gas. And he even provided money for our dates. People had gift cards sitting around they hadn't used in 2 years, got at a White Elephant or something, and they gave them to us. One of my favorite stories from this actually is, this is not in my sermon, but we got to go to this movie theater that we walked in and thought it was a nightclub. And so we turned around and walked out, and then we were like, no, this is the right place. Walked back in, and it had like a cigar lounge and a martini bar, and people were in tuxedos, like the people working there were in tuxedos, and I was like in shorts that were tearing and like a Willow t-shirt, and flip-flops. And so turns out it was a super ritzy movie theater that gave you pillows and blankets and complimentary popcorn in these big recliners, and then would bring you menus to order like really nice food while you watched your movie. And they forgot to give us our complimentary popcorn the first time, and the girl was almost in tears apologizing about it, so we got to come back for free. It was the best, the most awesome thing ever. It's like, I don't think they realized, like, we're from Detroit. This is way better, popcorn or not. And God provided for us. And he provided for us even for these dates. I don't know where you're at this morning. Maybe you're close to God. You're in a season of enough. And I just thank you, God, for that. Thank you that you provide enough. But maybe this morning you're in a season of not enough. And your relationship with other people and with God's not doing well. You feel distant. And it hurts. And if that's you this morning, I just want you to know that Jesus Christ died on the cross for your sins so that God could offer you his free gift of grace, and that grace is enough for every not enough in your heart, in your body, in your mind, in your spirit, and that all you have to do to receive that gift of grace is just to reach out your hands and receive it. But it's a sacrifice. Remember, it's a sacrifice. It's a sacrifice of my perspective, of my control, of my way. But I just want to tell you, the best part of life is being loved by God. This is the best part of life. And Amber and I look back on that time at Willow Creek when we had nothing and we were so scared. And when the chips are down now, we point back out the window to the car that we got for free, and we just say, but God has been there for us, and he cares, and he has provided for us before, and he will do it again. And I don't know how this is going to happen, and I don't know how this pain is going to subside, and I don't know what we're going to do because we're afraid, but he has done it before, and he is enough for every not enough that we will face. And I just want to give you the opportunity this morning to experience that, to allow God to give you that free gift of grace. So would you pray with me? Lord Jesus, I just give you all of me. I cry Towdah, thanking you that you are enough for every situation in my life. I surrender my control. I sacrifice my way, and I say, thank you, God. Thank you that I'm even here. Thank you that I'm alive, that you've made me, that you see me, that you hear me, that you know me in my fullness. I thank you in advance for all the ways that you will provide for me. And I believe that Jesus died on the cross for my sins and that grace is enough. And I receive that grace, Lord. I receive it. And I just ask you to fill every crack, every not enough in my spirit, in my body, in my mind. And I surrender. Please, Lord, show me how to move forward. Show me my next step. I trust you. In the name of Jesus, amen.